Do you folks remember the Emily Weinman incident? Well, she just got paid a lot of money for it, so I thought it would be fun to go over what happened originally and why she's raking in that cash. My dog just... No, okay, yeah, come on. Come on. Under the green screen. There you go. That's right. Let's get into it. This is Emily Weinman. At the time that this body-worn camera recorded her, she was 20. She was also on Wildwood Beach, New Jersey. Why is that important? Because this beach does not permit the possession of alcohol by anyone, and New Jersey does not permit the possession of alcohol by a minor in a public place anywhere. Beach police were quick to notice this and decided to approach Emily. After talking to Emily, officers decided that her behavior, combined with the presence of alcohol, was enough to ask Emily to consent to a preliminary breath test. She voluntarily agreed, and then blew zeros twice. Unhappy that they had been wrong, the officers decided to beat her up. Wait, no, that's not right. There's more to this story. Silly me. Police weren't able to establish that she had been drinking, but there was still a container of alcohol in her possession. Emily stated it belonged to an aunt who was not present, but the officers definitely had enough probable cause to believe that because the aunt had left, if she had even existed, and because the alcohol was on the beach towels that Emily had been sitting on, then Emily was technically in possession of the alcohol, which is a crime. So they decided to beat her up. No, hold on. There's still more to this. Hold on. We'll get there. At this point, officers are absolutely justified in issuing a citation, also known as a court summons, and they instruct Emily to identify herself. She declines, and since New Jersey is not a stop and ID state, she does not have to provide ID when she's merely detained. Unless, of course, she's being issued a court summons. Oops. Because she failed to identify herself, which in this context is a crime, the officers beat her up. Nope, we still aren't there yet. Hold on, hold that thought. Emily began to walk away after one of the officers asked the other if he has his handcuffs, which is obstruction since she's basically slowly fleeing the officers to prevent her own arrest. And then the officers beat her up. Ooh. Almost, but not quite. Almost. We're so close. After she is being followed by officers, because of course they're following her, one of the officers states that they're going to drop her if she keeps walking away. Now, that's pretty unprofessional, and I'll consider a strike against the officers, but it isn't all bad. See, when issuing lawful orders, the orders will generally hold up in court better if the person issuing them gives the order and then establishes the consequences for what will happen if they aren't followed. For example, stop or I'll tase you. Command is issued, consequence is explained. Yes, the officer did that, and good for him, but he could have done it better. So, this is the part where officers assault Emily, though, right? Wrong! This is the part where she assaults the officers. What? I know! As they get close, she turns around, puts her hands up, and strikes the officer in the chest. That's when she was taken to the ground. Woo. Now, before we continue, let's sum up the escalation of crimes. Public intoxication, they had a reasonable suspicion but no probable cause, so we'll strike that from the list. Possession of alcohol in public by a minor, they had probable cause, so we'll add it. Failure to ID, probable cause. Obstruction, probable cause. Aggravated assault, probable cause. See, in New Jersey, it's aggravated assault. Penny, in or out? Just in or out? Pick one. Anyway, where was I? See, in New Jersey, it's aggravated assault when it's an assault against a police officer. Before I keep explaining this incident from the police's point of view, wouldn't it be fair to let Emily describe it first and compare it to what we're seeing happening in the video? I think so. Let's give that a try.
Emily, I want to ask you about the video. We all watched it. It's incredibly difficult to see.
It is incredibly difficult to see. It is, because here we have a young lady, her whole life in front of her, who's making poor life choices that are compounding on her previous poor life choices that are happening, within the span of minutes. And we get to this. And I think that someone needs to take her aside and be like, hey, let's explain how this works to you.
Tell me how you're doing. Were you injured at all?
Yes. My neck and my back were hurting a lot more since after the incident. Had a headache for just like a day, It's been more like emotionally exhausting for me.
So she was injured in her neck and her back after the incident. Not her head, right? Apparently her head is fine, which leads me to believe... I'm confused by this. That would mean that the strikes against her head weren't very hard. Huh, isn't that interesting? It's more of an emotional damage than anything. So, I guess she wasn't very physically hurt? I don't know. We'll talk about that. We'll go into that. Just a weird statement for her to make.
Take us through what happened. Did the officers tell you why they were there in the first place, and how did things escalate so quickly?
They didn't tell me why they were there, but it was pretty obvious, why they were there.
There was an open container of alcohol.
It was sealed, but there was alcohol.
Oh, so it was pretty obvious why they were there, so you should have known that you couldn't walk away because you knew that there were crimes happening. Okay, that's a weird statement to make. That doesn't really help you in court, but okay.
Open in the on the beach. Well, not open on the beach, but in the open. So they came out. They asked me how old I was. I gave them my age, corroborated, did the breathalyzer test. Yes, I'm 20 years old.
Oh, she's 20. So there's the confirmation. She can't be near alcohol. She certainly can't be near alcohol because of her probation. But we're not there yet. Whew! It's about to get interesting. Hold on. Keep watching.
Did the breathalyzer test. Both tests came back negative. And then after that, they wouldn't leave.
Yeah, they wouldn't leave because they were investigating 2 crimes. The first one was a minor consuming alcohol in a public place, which was not permitted because she's a minor and it's a public place. So that's the first thing that they were investigating, and that's what they used the PBT for. The second thing they're investigating is the presence of alcohol in apparent possession by a minor in a public place. That does not require the PBT. That is a completely separate thing. Glad we figured that out.
And it just escalated to that point to where they wanted to lock me up because I wouldn't give them my name.
Yes, because failure to ID is an arrestable offense. So of course they're going to try to lock you up.
Because I did everything they said to do.
No, you didn't. You didn't give them your name, the thing you were legally required to do. Don't come out here and say you did everything they told you to, because one of those things they told you to do was give a name, which you didn't give.
Why wouldn't you give them your name?
I didn't really see the point in it. Something in my gut was just telling me something wasn't right,
Oh, but you did. See, something in your gut telling you not to give them your name, that would make sense if you actually knew anything about the law, but she doesn't. Otherwise, she would not have gotten herself into this situation. And judging by her past criminal history, she probably doesn't know much about the law. I'm getting ahead of myself, though. See, I can't tell you yet. It's not the right time in this video. But, oh goodness, there's some good stuff. If you think you are not required to give your name, one of the things you should do is ask the officer whether or not it is actually required. Because some of them are a little tricky, and they'll imply that's required without actually saying it. So it's always a good idea to check.
We should mention you're on probation for a 2016 arrest.
Yes, I am.
Did that have anything to do with the reason why you didn't give them your name?
No, not mainly, no.
What? Not mainly, no. But that means, you know what that means? It must have been a contributing factor. So we also have her for violating probation after serving approximately 6 months of a 4-year probation, which she was sentenced to after being charged with, oh my goodness, look at that! Look at it! Criminal trespass, criminal mischief times 2, damage to property, simple assault times 2, reckless endangerment times 2, and burglary. Yes, I have requested those documents. I'm very curious to find out what the whole deal is. But how shocking. How shocking that she didn't want to give her name when being near alcohol would have been a probation violation. You know? How shocking. Let's add probation violation to the list, why don't we?
Police say that you struck the officer when he went to handcuff you. Did you?
No, I didn't.
Is that right? Is it? Let's just rewatch the body cam on that. And that's a hand on the camera. That's assault. Can't pull the wool over these eyes, Emily.
And then the officers say you kicked them and spat at them.
I'm not sure about the kicking part. I mean, if anything, that was after the fact, after I got attacked by the officer.
After this, I'm so mad I can't even speak. After the assault? No, Emily. That's not an assault, that's an arrest. See, you walked away while detained, and then when officers followed you, you pushed one of them. That's assault. They took you to the ground because it's pretty clear at that point that you are going to resist with force. I don't know what to tell you. Well, I do know what to tell you. You need to learn a little bit more about the law, young lady.
I'm not sure about the kicking part.
Oh, yes you are, and so am I, because I have it from two different angles. Here's her kicking from this angle, and here's her kicking from another angle.
With the spitting thing, when he smashed my head into the ground, I got sand in my mouth. So when they got me to the point where they got me on my stomach, after I was done struggling for trying to defend myself, I spit the sand in my mouth, which makes me look like I was spitting at the officer, but that wasn't the case. And
oh, well, sure, after she's being lawfully arrested, yeah, I guess she might get sand in her mouth on the beach while she's fighting officers who are, again, lawfully arresting her. So, yeah, she'd want to spit that out of her mouth. Right into the officer's face. Yeah, okay, look at that. She makes eye contact and loogies that sucker right at the officer. Who are you trying to fool, lady? Who? Because it's not me. I'm not fooled. There is more to this story, and for that we'll have to return to the body cam footage. Officers attempted to get her hands behind her back, but she was a slippery little eel and was wriggling her way out of their clutches. So let's add resisting arrest to the list of crimes. Then, a third officer came in, and since merely holding her down wasn't enabling the officers to effect an arrest, he engaged in what is known as distractionary strikes. Before we get into this, let me explain use of force to somebody who might not know what that is. The use of force continuum describes the permissible force that an officer can use and the standard escalation and de-escalation of that force. An officer can use the minimum reasonable force to effect an arrest, and if a lesser use of force is ineffective, they can escalate the force used. In New Jersey, it starts with officer presence, but that wasn't enough for Emily to surrender to officers. Then there's verbal commands, which still didn't work. Then there's physical force, which in this instance started with officers holding Emily down, trying to force her hands behind her back. This was ineffective, and Emily continued to assault officers, so another escalation was warranted, this time to strikes, which, at the time, were permitted by the New Jersey Attorney General. However, it appears that the officer struck her in the back of the head, which probably isn't permitted. However, I have reason to believe that he didn't mean to. Generally, an officer won't strike the head because the odds of breaking your fingers are higher than most people would like. Also, the department likely only authorizes it in extreme circumstances. I believe he was aiming for her arm, since that would be the most reasonable place to strike in order to get her arm behind her back, but because she was trying to escape, he missed and struck her in the head. We will return to this when we discuss the civil suit. And yes, there was a civil suit. What about this chokehold? I don't think this is a chokehold either. I think it's head control. See, when someone is struggling, one of the best ways to control their body is to control their head. So you want to get your arm, and you put their chin right in the elbow there. And you take your hand, and you grab them by the back of their head, and now you have control over them. Because my arm is probably stronger than my neck, right? So if I'm flailing around, I can, I'm not going to yank it, but I can, tighten my hold on the chin and control pretty much the rest of their body. Because I can't move much of my body if I can't move much of my head. It's pretty cool. I was trained in hand-to-hand combat in the Army, and while I'm not excellent at it, I know enough of the basics to have an informed opinion on this. Plus, her lawyer stated that she didn't have any bruising after the incident, and bruising/skin abrasions are pretty common when it comes to chokeholds. No petechia either, that thing that often shows up on people who have been choked. Oh, that's just weird. See, my specialty as a criminal investigator was domestic violence, so I know a little bit about choking victims. The facts don't seem to support the claim that she had been choked to the point where she couldn't breathe. So, what was the end result of this incident? No charges were filed against the officers, and the mayor stated he believed that their actions were reasonable. Emily went to court and eventually accepted a plea deal in which she pleaded guilty to disorderly conduct of all things, which got her a year of probation. A plea deal? Why? I can only speculate, but I imagine the fact that she was young and had a 1-year-old child played heavily into it. Also, the fact that the officer punched her in the head, either intentionally or more likely unintentionally, wouldn't have helped. So, what could Emily have done to avoid all of this? My recommendation would have been to accept the citation and tell her probation officer immediately. She could have then had her aunt write an affidavit to submit to court establishing that the alcohol was in fact hers. Folks, it's almost always better to fight the charges in court and not on the street, or in this case, the beach. Police don't have to prove that you are guilty to issue you a citation or to arrest you. They just have to establish that there is probable cause to believe a crime has been committed, is being committed, or will be committed. In this case, they had that. There was a bottle of alcohol next to a girl who was underage and on a public beach. That's probable cause. In court, the crime must actually be proven, so that's often a more appropriate time to fight. Plus, you got a lawyer and can bring in witnesses and provide evidence. It's really a no-brainer. Emily decided to file a civil lawsuit and actually won $325,000. Wow, but why? I'm still thinking it's because of the, maybe, accidental head strikes, possibly because of her alleged depression following this incident. I don't know yet. I filed some requests for the paperwork on that decision, so we will see. I can tell you that the current mayor doesn't seem terribly excited by it, and the former mayor was very unhappy. The two officers that were initially involved in the arrest were dismissed from the lawsuit, again indicating that it was the third officer's actions that caused the payout. Until we have the actual info, we can only guess, and normally this would be the end of the video, but I've seen people just bashing individuals on the internet who have correctly stated the facts of this incident, while I was looking into the facts of this incident. So let's address some of those, because these people need help. So there's this app, Imgur, and there have been a few posts that I've discovered about this incident, and there are a couple people who have been fighting the good fight, trying to put out the facts, and good luck, you guys. But everyone else is just jumping on them. So this person says, there were 0 crimes, 2 suspected crimes for which she tested completely negative for, which isn't grounds to detain, surveil, maybe. Okay, so what they're saying is, there were no crimes, the police should just observe from a distance. Well, that would make sense for consumption of alcohol, but they weren't just investigating consumption of alcohol, like I said earlier in the video. They were investigating possession of alcohol, which doesn't require surveillance. It was already there. They already saw it. Surveillance over. It doesn't require it to be open. It doesn't require her to have been consuming it. That is a minor possession of alcohol in a public place. That is a crime, right? They had her for that. That's going to require her to provide her name, which she didn't do, and then the rest of this stuff happened. I hope that helps. At no point did the officers observe her consuming alcohol. In fact, the alcohol was still sealed. There is no probable cause. Again, same thing. There were multiple crimes they were investigating. That's a pretty common thing, as people don't realize that it wasn't just about the PBT. They see, oh, well, she passed the PBT, but officers still want to cause trouble. No, the second crime was that she was in possession of alcohol in a public place as a minor. Anyway. It blows my mind why it's so hard for you to understand why a fully grown police officer beating, as you said, a minor is effed. There were so many other options. She should not have struck him, but she was frightened. He had every advantage and was in a position of power and behaved atrociously. We tell effing children not to hit people because they're angry. We should be able to expect that trained officers' retaliation because you hit him first is not an excuse. All right, so this person, against all odds, and I say against all odds because most people won't admit it, recognizes that Emily struck first. Now, that's not what ended up with her getting punched in the head. The result of that was she was taken to the ground because it was clear that she was going to fight officers. The ground is the best place to gain control of someone. The strikes were because she was spitting sand at officers and kicking them. One officer was actually kicked in the genitals, which is very unfortunate for him. Anyway, but she was struck because the use of force was not effective. They had 2 officers on her, and she was still managing to get her arms away from them, still managing to kick them, still managing to spit sand in their face. So that warrants an escalation. Now, should she have been hit in the head? Probably not. But the arm, absolutely. That would be completely justified in my mind, based on my training and experience. What else do we have? It wasn't open. This is about the alcohol container. It wasn't open, and it's not illegal to own alcohol. It's obstruction if there's a crime he's investigating. But no actual crime. He's bullying and intimidating, but no crime, no ID necessary, so there can be no consequence as he's not investigating. Sequence matters. Okay, yeah, sequence does matter, as the person who was replying to him stated. Again, 2 crimes. There were 2 crimes. I think all of these are going to be about that. There are 2 crimes, folks. Possession and consumption. They were able to prove that consumption was not the case. They still had her for possession. Okay? Sequence of events that Emily engaged in directly led to her assault. If she had given her name, nothing would have happened. If she hadn't assaulted the officers, it probably wouldn't have happened. If she hadn't kicked the officers and spit at the officers, she probably would not have been struck. So, poor life choices all around. What else do we have? Oh, this person calls into question minor in vicinity of alcohol, you mean. That's actually a very good point. I didn't care much for the way this person stated it on the internet. But this alcohol allegedly belonged to her aunt, who was not present. So we could say, well, it's not in her possession, it's in her aunt's possession, but her aunt's not there, so it's not in her aunt's possession. This alcohol was on, there were 2 beach towels that Emily was using, at least 2. She was on one, the alcohol was on another. She is occupying these beach towels. Anything on those beach towels could be presumed to be in her possession, right? This isn't like some bottle in the sand in the middle of nowhere that you go, hey, who's closer to this? This belongs to you now. No, this is on her stuff. It's enough to have probable cause for possession. Now, she could probably easily argue that in court, but court's the place to argue this. Ooh! Well, that's a fun insult. I'm not going to read them to you. This poor guy. The Mobius strip of law enforcement. You are under arrest for resisting arrest. No, she was under arrest for failing to ID because she committed a crime, possession of alcohol in a public place. Right? Whether or not she meant to, that's enough for a citation, which means that she has to provide ID, which means that she can't just walk away. She is detained. Almost all the comments that I saw on this site were basically that. Even when the situation was explained again and again by the people who were explaining it, people just couldn't grasp the fact that there are 2 crimes. The most important takeaway from this, I think, should be there were 2 crimes they were investigating. It wasn't just consumption of alcohol, it was also possession of alcohol. Because it's on her beach blankets, that's enough for probable cause, which means that she must identify herself, and then she should fight this in court, which she probably could have had a pretty successful case if she had fought it in court. It's just that the police are not the people you fight this with. There are set roles for police, and then judges, and everyone in between, right? Police can't do everything. They shouldn't do everything. They shouldn't be the judge, jury, executioner, right? They should establish that there's probable cause, and then a court should figure out whether or not elements of the crime have been met, and then a jury, if it comes to that, should determine whether or not this whole thing is reasonable, right? There is a system in place. We should not expect a single person to be able to do all of that. So in this case, the police were not a single person in charge of that. They were just saying, yep, we have probable cause, let's move it up the chain. That's it for now, though. Until the next time, be good, stay safe.